Nice, shalom, shalom. I'm going to start off this video by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone that rule well, that teach well, while learning truth 100% according to the Bible. I also want to say shalom to the elect, the 144,000 men, prophet, servants scattered abroad the four corners of the earth, and shalom to the Akwaf, which are you sisters that are sincere in your children, shalom. And in today's video is going to be just a little update video of the things that are basically taking place over there in the so-called Middle East with those wars that are happening. So now you got those Amalekites over there in the land, those little hats, they're actually, preparing to, do another second strike against Iran, man. So we just constantly seeing that whole conflict over there continue to brew and get worse day by day. And this also comes at the time right when you had Donald Trump saying that, there was going to be an alleged ceasefire between Israel and Iran. So, that's just the time of season in which it is we're living in. As the Lord has said in the scriptures, we know that peace isn't coming unto the world, nor to this place, America, or to the land of Israel where those little hats are, So I'm actually getting this precept that I got right here, right, before we get into the video. This would be 1 Thessalonians. And I'm going to go straight to the point. Chapter 5 and verse 3, right? In the KJV, because we know this is what the Lord said will ultimately take place when they start talking about peace and all of those different types of things and stuff getting back to normal and all of this stuff in which we see them ultimately pushing in the atmosphere into the world and the minds of the people, making them believe that there's going to be peace from these said conflicts that are ultimately taking place. We know that that's not coming, right? And this is 1 Thessalonians 5 and 3 in the KJV. It says, for when they, right, which is talking about these heathens, mainly Esau, Edom, who's in rulership right now. That's all we hear Donald Trump and all of these other nations ultimately trying to push for, but mainly America, right? And it says, when they shall say peace and safety, right, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. And that's ultimately what's coming, man, is destruction. No such thing as peace is going to happen after all of these conflicts in which it is that we ultimately see occurring worldwide with these wars, man. They're only going to continue to get worse and worse as time progresses, man, because ultimately what the Lord is going to bring forth out of these conflicts that are occurring are World War III. That's going to be a main prophecy that's going to take place, in the very near future, right? And it's actually already started on a smaller scale, but we know ultimately it's just going to continue to grow and grow as time progresses, right? And I'm actually get that as well, right? Because the Lord Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, he actually told that to the disciples, man. When they was asking him about what shall be the signs of thy coming, he told them that there will be wars and rumors of wars, right? And this is the time and season that we're in, right? So this is St. Matthew 24 and 6, KJV. It says, and ye shall hear wars, right? So you have active wars that are actively going on now. You got the whole Israel and Iran conflict that is taking place. You got Russia and Ukraine bombing each other back to back, and it says rumors of wars, which are talks of wars that are actually to come in the near future, right? You're having talks of China invading Taiwan. You're having talks of, North Korea going up against South Korea and all of these other various countries, India and Pakistan, things of that nature, right? But it says, see that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet, right? And we know ultimately the end is going to be that thermonuclear destruction, which is going to come upon America and the land of Israel via the Third World War. But we know before that can ultimately come into fruition that the MOTBC hip has to be made mandatory, which they're waiting on future prophecies to fulfill ultimately before this war can really reaches its climax, right? So I'm going to get into this video, and we're going to basically listen to what it is that the guy is saying, But before I start the video, I'm going to say fair use. Fair use under 1976 Copyright Act. Not getting paid for this video. This is only for educational purposes only.
What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, a.k.a. NY Prepper. It is Sunday, June 29th, 2025, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now it is 13:19 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Ukraine and from the Middle East. So Al Arabia News is reporting that Israel is planning a second round of strikes on Iran.
Right. So you heard what it is that he basically just said, Israel, those little hats over there, right? Those Amalekites, they're preparing for another strike on Iran. And we know that situation in itself is what's going to be the catalyst that's ultimately going to bring about World War III. Because as it tells you in Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 45, that the least of the flock should surely draw them out. And those Amalekites have already basically drawn America into this conflict, man. And we know the more that they continue to just keep attacking Iran, that's going to have to pull America in more and more. And it's ultimately going to pull them in to the point where you're going to have Russia, China, and all of these other different nations that are allies to Iran to join the fight as well, man. And that's what all of these things are ultimately leading up towards, you know. So like I said earlier, you know, there won't be any peace coming in the very near future, man. The only thing that's really going to come into this place is destruction and judgment from the Lord, man. You know, that's the time and season in which it is that we're living in. That's why you're going to continue to see these conflicts only get worse and worse, man, right? Ultimately leading up to the destruction of America and the land of Israel, right? So I'm actually go to that precept as well through the Spirit. I'm going to go to, that's a good one. I'm going to go right here. Right? This is Revelations chapter 11, right? And I'm going to start at verse 14. Because this is what we ultimately see happening. And like I said, it already has started. It's just different levels to World War III. You know, it won't ultimately get to the point where those missiles are shot off to ultimately that chip is made mandatory. But World War III is basically already started, man. You have everybody that have already choose their sides. You know, you got Israel and America, and they're basically up against the whole world, man. You know, and everybody is confederate against Israel and America, man. Right. And it's going to lead into their destruction, their downfall. Right. But it says the second woe is past, right? Talking about World War II, which occurred from 1939 to 1945. That war has already taken place, right? And it said, and behold, the third woe, right, coming quickly, which is talking about the third destruction or the third world's war, which will result in the destruction of Babylon, the great America, right, in Israel. But unlike, you know, America, Israel will be builded up again, right, because that's going to be the Holy Land and the capital for the Israelites when the Lord Yahushua returns in the midst of World War III and sets up the kingdom of heaven upon the earth. That's where our Holy Land is going to be located. But this place, America, is going to be destroyed utterly. Right through the Third World War. This place is going to be a desert, man. You know, and that's what we see all of these conflicts ultimately leading up towards, you know. So I'm actually getting another precept that I got, right? This is Malachi chapter 4, and I'm going to start at verse 1 in the KJV. And it says, for behold, the day cometh, right, that shall burn as an oven, right? And that day is coming quickly, man. And that's what the end scenario of all of these wars that are taking place around the world, mainly that conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Iran, that's what that's going to lead to, man. Nuclear destruction for both the state of Israel and America and various other places where those ICBM missiles are going to ultimately hit during this Third World War, right? But it says, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble, right? And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch, right? So basically everything over here is going to be destroyed, man. And over there in that land of Israel during the Third World War, when these things actually, you know, ultimately began to take place, man. You know, everything is going to be destroyed. You know, and that's ultimately going to be the judgment from Yahweh Bashim Yahushua that he's going to bring upon this place, America, you know, and various other countries that do get hit, right? But that's what we see all of these conflicts leading up towards, man, you know, and that's ultimately what's going to take place in the very near future, man, you know. So I'm actually get back into the video so we can finish listening to what it is he's saying. But, you know, that's what's going to stem from all of these conflicts in which it is that we ultimately see occurring. And I'm actually go to that, right, in the book of Ecclesiastes, because it tells us, you know, there's a time and season for everything under the heavens, man, you know. And we're living in that time right now. And I'm going to go straight to the point, verse 8, right? And it says, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace, man. And that's the time period in which it is that we're currently up in. You know, we're in a time of war happening, and that's why you see all of these different conflicts that are occurring and beginning to brew up worldwide around the world with these different nations that are ultimately fighting against each other. That's how we know that there won't be any peace, even though we know that's what Donald Trump and all of these other different leaders in these foreign countries are trying to push for. But that's not what's coming, man, because at the end of the day, as it tells us in Isaiah 46, in verse 10, that, the counsel of the Lord shall stand, roughly paraphrasing it. So we know that ultimately this is the Lord's counsel, which is to bring forth World War III and to destroy this place, America, Babylon the Great, and to take down Esau, Edom's rulership, man. That's all a part of prophecy. That's why it tells you in 2nd Esdras chapter 6, verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world, meaning this world, this rulership now that we're currently up under, and Jacob, meaning you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, is the beginning of it that followeth. And in order for us to receive that world that is to come, this world has to be done away with, right? And it's going to be done away with via the Third World War, man. That's coming, right? So yeah, I just wanted to get that precept, but I'm gonna get back into the video real quick. Right, bear with me. Let me pull this up.
Which will be significantly more destructive than the first round of attacks. So that's very, very interesting.
Right. And just heard a little glimpse of what it is he said. He basically said that the attacks that Israel is about to come with this time around against Iran is going to be worse than the first previous attacks that they did, I believe, maybe about a week or two ago. So that just proving to you that this conflict is only going to get worse and worse, man. No peace is coming over there to the so-called Middle East, man. Because what the Lord wants to come, that's where the World War III is mainly going to take place at, in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, over there in what they call today the Middle East. It tells you that in the book of Revelations that, they're going to be led into the Valley of Troops, which is called Armageddon in the Hebrew, which means mountain of troops, where all of these nations and their militaries is ultimately going to be led to by Yahweh Bashim Yahushua to fight in the Third World War. So that's ultimately what we see this conflict ultimately building up towards, right? And I'm actually going to go to a precept to prove that as well, right? Because that's the will of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, man, to bring these nations down there to the Middle East and to ultimately to judge them. This is Joel chapter 3. And I'm going to start at verse 2, right? And it says, I will also gather all nations, right? This is the Lord, because we know that ultimately he's the one that's controlling all of these things in which it is that is occurring, right? All nations, which talking about these heathen nations, all of those nations that it tells you about in Psalm chapter 83, that were ultimately confederate against the Lord's people, right? These heathen nations, so-called Ishmaelites, right? Which are the so-called Arabs of the day, Edom, which is the so-called white people today, Moab, which are the so-called Chinese people of the day. All of these different nations, the Lord is going to drag down there to the Middle East. And as you see from what's happening, you see those are all of the nations that are getting involved in this war, right? You got America, which are the Edomites, they're bagging Israel, which are also Edomites, those Amalekites over there. Then you got Iran, which are the Persians, right? They're heathens, Ishmaelites. And you got Og and Magog, which is Russia. They're also Edomites. And you got Moab, which are, the so-called Chinese people of the day. All of them are coming to their aid, right? And they're all joining in this conflict because this is ultimately the counsel of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. And it says, and will bring them down, right, into the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew tongue means Yehoshaphat, where the Lord is ultimately going to bring forth his judgment upon these nations, right? And it said, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel, right, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land, right? So that's ultimately why this Third World War is going to happen, man, because it's all a form of the Lord bringing forth judgment upon these heathen nations, man. So that's why we see all of these things ultimately happening in the world, man, and why they're constantly getting worse and worse as the time goes on, right? So I'm actually go down, right? This is Joel chapter 3, and I'm going to go to verse... I'm going to start at verse 9. It said, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, right? Which are these heathen nations. It says, prepare war, right? And that's what we ultimately see these nations doing, man. You see all of these nations preparing for war. Iran, Russia, China, America, North Korea, all of these different heathen nations are preparing for war. That's what they have in their mind right now, because that's the spirit that the Lord ultimately wants them to be in, man, so he can bring forth his will and judge these nations, right? And it said, and wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, right? Verse 10, it said, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. And that's what you have going on now, man. You got all of these nations that were once upon a time did not possess nuclear capabilities, right? now they possess these things, due to, Russia, which is that guard, as it tells you about in Ezekiel 38, that's going to be protecting Persia and all of these other smaller little nations. They have the backing of the bear, man, which is Russia. So now they have the possession of nuclear capabilities due to their ties to Russia. They're no longer scared of America. That's why you got the weak saying that they're strong, man, right? And that's militarily wise that they're strong, because they also have the capabilities and the possessions of these missiles, man, these nuclear ICBMs, right? And it says, verse 11, assemble yourselves and come all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about thither. Cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Right? This is verse 12. It says, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, right? For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And that's where Lord Yahushua is going to return during the midst of World War III. And he's going to take down these nations, man. That's all goes a part of Esau, Edom's rulership coming to an end, man. So that's what we see ultimately all of these conflicts leading up towards, man, which is the downfall of Esau, Edom's, the so-called white man's rulership, man. And it's going to be taken down via the Third World War. Because once this place America is destroyed via those nuclear warheads, and the land of Israel, right, where those Amalekites are destroyed, then everything else is going to fall right down with it, man. So this is what we're seeing the beginning stages of, right? And it's picking up quickly, man, So I'm going to actually get back into this video. We're going to watch just a little bit more of it, right? But I kind of hit the point with what I was talking about. That's what's basically stemming out of all of these conflicts that we see happening, mainly over there in the Middle East. That's going to lead up to the Battle of Armageddon,
And we had the largest air attack against Ukraine last night since the start of the Ukraine war. Russia seemed to concentrate their attack on western Ukraine, prompting air raid sirens to go off in...
Right. So we basically just hear everything in which it is he's saying. The whole Russia and Ukraine conflict is getting worse and worse. Israel and Iran still going at each other's necks. So like I said, man, no peace is coming to this place, America, or the world as these people know it or like to believe in their minds. Only thing is coming is judgment, man, from the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. So, that's pretty much everything I had to say with today's video. Lord's willing to be edifying, just a quick hit through the spirit of things that are basically going on. Till the next time, I'm going to say shalom.